Every Elder Scrolls game starts the same way. You're a prisoner. No name, no past, no explanation. But each of these heroes carries an origin story that runs way deeper than a jail cell. From stolen souls to dragon blood, these 8 protagonists shaped the entire history of Tamriel. Let's break down where they all came from, starting with the one who was already dead, the Vestige. Most Elder Scrolls heroes start in a jail cell. The Vestige starts on a sacrificial altar, gets their soul ripped out by a Daedric prince, and then wakes up in literal hell, which is, not ideal. It's 2E 582, the Interregnum. Nobody's on the Ruby Throne, 3 alliances are tearing each other apart, and Molag Bal decides this is the perfect time to merge his realm of Cold Harbor with the mortal plane, an event called the Plane Meld, because apparently a continent-wide war wasn't enough chaos for one era. The player character gets sacrificed in a ritual orchestrated by Mannimarco on behalf of Molag Bal. Their soul is physically torn from their body and dragged to Cold Harbor, but the body doesn't stop working. It keeps moving, keeps thinking, keeps fighting. No soul inside, just a remnant, a vestige of what used to be a complete person. That's where the name comes from. You're not technically alive. You're an animated husk running on whatever scraps of spiritual energy Molag Bal didn't bother to fully consume. Think of it like a photocopy of a person that somehow gained sentience and decided to fight God. Here's the thing. Being soulless makes the vestige completely immune to necromancy. Necromantic magic targets the connection between soul and body. No soul, no connection, no control. Every necromancer in Tamriel is functionally useless against you. It also explains why you can't permanently die. There's nothing for death to claim. You just reconstitute, which is one of the more elegant explanations for MMO respawn mechanics anyone has ever written. You're not breaking immersion. You're literally an undying remnant that physics doesn't know what to do with. The soul situation doesn't stay hopeless forever. Varen Aquilarios and the 5 companions devise a plan to use the Amulet of Kings to end the Plane Meld. They need someone who can survive a direct confrontation with Molag Bal, someone whose soul is already under his control, yet whose body persists in Tamriel. The Vestige is the only candidate. Through the amulet's power, Varen attunes the Vestige's soul back to Mundus. Not a full restoration, more like re-anchoring what's left of you to the mortal plane. You're still marked by Cold Harbor, but you're no longer drifting between states of existence like a metaphysical typo. Every other Elder Scrolls protagonist starts as a prisoner. The Vestige cranks that motif past breaking point. You're not just imprisoned, you're executed, soul-stripped, and left as a walking contradiction that shouldn't exist. The prison isn't a cell, it's your own hollowed-out body, and then you use that broken, soulless husk to kill a god. But if you think getting your soul stolen sounds rough, wait until you hear about the protagonist who killed his own brother-in-law and had to flee his homeland before the story even started. Cyrus. Most Elder Scrolls protagonists are blank slates. You pick a race, you pick a face, you wake up in a prison cell, and the game says good luck. Cyrus is not that. He has a name, he has a voice, he has a family he failed, and a brother-in-law he murdered, and that makes him arguably the most human protagonist in the entire franchise. Born in Sentinel around 2E 831, Cyrus grew up as Azara's younger brother, a woman who would eventually become a political revolutionary. But Cyrus wasn't thinking about politics. He was thinking about survival. Azara's husband was abusive, and Cyrus solved that problem the only way he knew how. He killed him, which is, not ideal from a legal standpoint. That murder forced him into exile. He became a mercenary, a sailor, a drifter bouncing between ports with zero interest in going home. But then, Azara disappeared. The year is 2E 864. Tiber Septim's empire has rolled through Hammerfell like a freight train, and Stros Mackay is under full imperial occupation. Somewhere in that chaos, Cyrus's sister vanished while working with rebels. So he goes back. Not for politics, not for Hammerfell, for her. Here's where it gets complicated. Cyrus arrives expecting a rescue mission, and instead walks into a revolutionary movement that desperately needs a figurehead. The island is crawling with imperial soldiers, corrupt officials, pirates, and supernatural forces tied to ancient Yokudan mythology. He has to navigate all of it with actual diplomacy, something you'd never expect from a guy whose previous solution to domestic abuse was homicide. And the ending isn't some grand chosen one moment. Cyrus helps negotiate a treaty, an actual political document that preserves Hammerfell's autonomy while technically folding it into the Empire. He's not saving the world. He's saving a culture. He's ensuring that Redguard traditions and self-governance survive, rather than being crushed. That's what makes Cyrus fascinating. Every other Elder Scrolls protagonist fights a world-ending threat. Cyrus fights bureaucracy. He fights occupation. He fights the slow cultural death that comes when an empire absorbs a smaller nation. The stakes aren't cosmic. They're deeply, painfully human. Now Now some fans have speculated that Cyrus might be a Shezarene, a mortal incarnation of Lorcan, but there's zero textual evidence for that. What is confirmed is simpler and more interesting. Cyrus is just a guy, a flawed, guilty, stubborn guy who went home to find his sister and accidentally became the reason Hammerfell still exists as anything more than an Imperial footnote. But if you think a family drama wrapped in political intrigue is intense, wait until you meet the protagonist who had to save an entire empire from a decade-long deception, all while starting from the bottom of a dungeon cell, the Eternal Champion. Here's something that doesn't get enough credit. The very first hero in Elder Scrolls history didn't save a city, didn't save a province. They crossed the entire continent of Tamriel alone to put an emperor back on his throne, and they did it over the course of 10 years. Let me explain. In 3E 389, the Imperial battle mage Jagar Tharn pulls off the most audacious coup in Tamriel's history. He doesn't just kill Emperor Uriel Septim VII. Instead, he banishes the real emperor to a pocket dimension, shapeshifts into his exact likeness, and rules the empire as a perfect imposter. For a decade, nobody notices. The Elder Council doesn't notice. The Blades don't notice. The entire continent just carries on while a power-hungry battle mage sits on the ruby throne wearing someone else's face, which is, not ideal. But here's where our hero enters the picture. The Eternal Champion starts exactly where every Elder Scrolls protagonist starts, in a cell, a prisoner with zero explanation for why they're there. Classic Bethesda. But unlike the prisoners who come after them, this one gets woken up by a ghost. Rhea Silman, Tharn's former apprentice, was murdered for discovering the conspiracy. Her spirit reaches through to the champion in dreams, breaks them out, and delivers the worst quest objective in RPG history. Go reassemble the Staff of Chaos. It's been shattered into pieces and scattered across every province in Tamriel. Good luck. And somehow, impossibly, they do it. From Skyrim to elsewhere, from High Rock to Black Marsh, the Eternal Champion tracks down every fragment. No fast travel lore-wise, no companions, just a teenager, estimated around 18 or 19 at the start, wandering an entire continent for a decade on the word of a dead woman they never met in life. Here's the thing that makes this protagonist foundational. They're the first player character to prove that one person can reshape all of Tamriel. Every hero that comes after, the Nerevarine, the hero of Kvatch, the Dragonborn, they all operate in single provinces. The Eternal Champion walked through all of them. That's the template for every world-saving prisoner who comes later. There's one detail that makes the champion unusual. They might actually have a name. Early arena documentation references someone called Talon, and the Elder Scrolls wiki lists them as contextually known as Talon, almost unheard of for an Elder Scrolls player character. Later games keep protagonists anonymous, referred to only by titles, but the first one might just be Talon, a 19-year-old kid who spent their entire 20s reassembling a magic staff and then killed the most powerful battle mage in the Empire. By 3E 399, the champion confronts Tharn in the Imperial Palace, defeats him, and restores the real Uriel Septim VII to power. 10 years of Imperial darkness ended, and then nothing. The Eternal Champion vanishes from the historical record entirely. They save the world, and then, apparently, just leave. I don't know what to tell you, but at least the Eternal Champion got to fight their battles on solid ground. Their successor wasn't so lucky, because the next protagonist had to survive something far worse than a continent-spanning scavenger hunt. They had to survive Oblivion itself, the Apprentice. Most Elder Scrolls heroes start in chains. The Apprentice starts in a classroom. Josian Kaid or Vatasha Trinell, depending on your preference, is a trainee battle mage at the Imperial Battlespire, a fortified magical academy floating in its own pocket dimension. They're not a prisoner. They're a student about to take their final exam, which is, not ideal when your exam building gets invaded by a Daedric prince. Here's the thing about the Battlespire. It wasn't just a school. It was the Empire's premier magical training facility, a fast track into the Imperial Battle Mage Corps. The apprentice wasn't some random nobody stumbling into destiny. They were an insider, climbing the ladder, doing everything right, and then Mehrunes Dagon kicked the ladder over and set it on fire. The timing matters. Battlespire takes place near the tail end of the Imperial Simulacrum, that same decade where Jagar Tharn impersonated the Emperor. Tharn's dealings with Daedric princes gave Mehrunes Dagon the opening he needed to launch a full invasion, slaughtering the Battlespire's inhabitants and corrupting the magical pacts keeping him out. The apprentice steps through the teleportation portal expecting a test. They get a massacre, but here's where it gets complicated. The apprentice has to navigate through multiple planes of oblivion, dealing with Dagon's lieutenants and an entire Daedric bureaucracy. There are factions within factions, competing interests among Dagon's own forces, and ancient divine contracts governing how much a Daedric prince apprentice can actually interfere with the mortal plane. The apprentice doesn't just fight their way out. They negotiate, manipulate, and outmaneuver entities that have existed since before time had a name. The institutional betrayal angle is what makes this origin genuinely unique. Every other Elder Scrolls hero is an outsider who proves themselves against the world. The apprentice believed in the system. They were part of the system, and the system failed them completely. The Empire's greatest magical institution got hollowed out from within because the people at the top were making deals with Daedric princes. Nobody warned the students, nobody evacuated, and the resolution isn't simple either. The apprentice ultimately forces Mehrunes Dagon to acknowledge he violated existing agreements governing his interaction with Nirn. They renegotiate the pacts, reasserting limits on his power, which raises an obvious question. If the apprentice successfully restricted Dagon, how exactly did the Oblivion Crisis happen 2 centuries later? Turns out, cosmic contracts work about as well as mortal ones. Loopholes the size of Oblivion gates. The apprentice is one of the least discussed protagonists in the franchise, partly because Battlespire is genuinely obscure and partly because the story operates somewhere between political intrigue and metaphysical contract law. But their origin represents something no other Elder Scrolls hero does. A person who did everything right, followed the rules, joined the correct institution, and got rewarded with the complete destruction of everything they'd worked toward. At least they got to yell at a Daedric prince about it. But if institutional betrayal by one Daedric conspiracy sounds bad, wait until you hear about the Agent, whose mission from the Emperor himself spiraled into something that literally broke reality. The Agent. Most Elder Scrolls protagonists stumble into their destiny. They wake up in a prison cell, get hit by a dragon, or lose their soul to a Daedric prince. The Agent is different. The Agent got a direct summons from Emperor Uriel Septim VII himself, because when you're part of the Blades, your vacation plans get cancelled real fast. The Agent was a trusted Blade operative assigned to the Emperor's service. Not some random soldier, but a skilled and loyal agent carrying out Imperial orders. The mission: investigate the ghost of King Lysandus haunting Daggerfall, and recover a sensitive letter the Emperor had sent to Queen Menesra that had fallen into the wrong hands. Sounds simple enough. Handle a ghost, grab some mail, head back. Except nothing in High Rock is ever simple. The Agent stepped into a tangled web of political intrigue that makes Game of Thrones look like a city council meeting. The kingdoms of Daggerfall, Wayrest, Sentinel, and Orsinium were locked in rivalries. Noble houses, knightly orders, the Underking, and Imperial spies all plotted against each other. At the center was one impossibly powerful artifact: the Totem of Tiber Septim, the control device for Numidium, the colossal brass golem that forged the Empire centuries ago. The Agent could hand the totem to the Emperor, or one of the regional kings, or Gortwog, the Orcish warlord fighting for recognition, or to the Underking. Each choice led to a radically different future for Western Tamriel. And here's where it gets truly strange, because the universe didn't pick just one. All of those outcomes happened at once. Reality fractured. Several kingdoms expanded their power dramatically. Orsinium became officially recognized. The Empire solidified control. Logically contradictory outcomes all unfolded simultaneously. Lore calls this the warp in the West, a dragon break where time ceases to be linear and allows conflicting histories to coexist in a single timeline. And the Agent was at the center, the mortal who delivered the totem and whose decisions triggered this reality-breaking event. Imagine starting your week chasing a ghost and fetching a letter, then ending it by shadering causality across an entire province. Most Elder Scrolls heroes change the world, and the world responds. The Agent's choices changed the world so much it couldn't decide which ending was real. Personal agency pushed beyond all limits, turning the cosmos into a paradox. And what happened next? The Agent vanishes. That's it. No retirement stories, no future cameos, no cryptic mentions. They delivered the totem, reality broke, and they disappeared from history. Whether silenced by political enemies, absorbed into the warp itself, or simply vanished under a new identity, nobody knows. The lore goes silent. What remains is a protagonist with a clear origin, a dedicated Imperial blade sent on a political errand, whose fate is one of Elder Scrolls' biggest mysteries. A spy turned paradox, a friend turned ghost story. But if you think one fractured timeline is weird, wait until you hear about the prisoner who might actually be the reincarnation of a murdered god, the Nerevarine. Every other protagonist on this list starts as a prisoner. That's kind of the franchise's thing. But the Nerevarine is the only one where the imprisonment feels engineered from the top down, orchestrated not just by an emperor, but possibly by fate itself. In 3E427, a prisoner born to uncertain parents under a certain sign arrives by boat at Seyda-Neen on Vardenfell. They've been released under direct orders from Emperor Uriel Septim VII and told to report to Caius Cosides, head of the blades in Morrowind. On the surface, standard Imperial intelligence work. Plant an agent, stabilize a volatile province. But here's where it gets complicated. The Ashlander tribes have prophesied for centuries that Indoril Nerevar would return. Nerevar was the Chimer warlord who united the Dunmer, led them against the Dwemer at Red Mountain, and was betrayed by his own counselors. Those counselors, Vivek, Almalexia, and Sotha Sil, used the heart of Lorcan to make themselves living gods. Three mortals who stole divinity and built a religion around pretending they deserved it. The prophecy says the Nerevarine will cast down the false gods and destroy the evil beneath Red Mountain, and Uriel Septim sends one specific prisoner who matches every criterion. Uncertain parents, born under a certain sign, expendable. Now here's the question nobody can answer. Did the Emperor know he was sending the actual reincarnation of Nerevar, or was he manufacturing one? The Blades had studied the prophecy for years. The cynical reading is that Uriel found a convenient prisoner who ticked the boxes and figured he could exploit local superstition. The metaphysical reading is that destiny guided the Emperor's hand, making him an instrument of something far older than his dynasty. The game never tells you which. That's the point. What follows is one of the most complex political navigations any Elder Scrolls protagonist undertakes. The Nerevarine must earn recognition from the Ashlander tribes, navigate the Tribunal Temple's hostility, deal with the Great Houses, and confront what actually happened at Red Mountain thousands of years ago. That truth is ugly. Dagoth Ur, once Nerevar's loyal friend, has been sitting beneath Red Mountain for millennia, connected to the heart, growing more powerful and insane. He's spreading blight across Vardenfell, corrupting people through dreams, and building a Kulakon, a giant construct powered by the heart itself. The Nerevarine solution is elegant and devastating. Using Kagranak's tools, the same artifacts that created the Tribunal's godhood, they sever the enchantments binding the heart to Morrowind. One act destroys Dagoth Ur's power, collapses his plans, and cuts the Tribunal off from divine energy. Vivek, Almalexia, and Sotha Sil don't die instantly, but their godhood begins fading. The entire religious structure of Dunmer civilization starts crumbling. One prisoner rewrote the rules of divinity, which is, not ideal if you're a living god coasting on stolen power for 3,000 years. But here's what elevates the Nerevarine from fascinating to genuinely mythic. After fulfilling the prophecy and reshaping an entire civilization, they leave, sail east to Akavir, the continent nobody returns from. No explanation. Just gone. Whether they're literally Nerevar reborn or someone who fulfilled a self-perpetuating prophecy remains deliberately ambiguous. And that ambiguity is the best thing about them, because the Nerevarine exists in that perfect space between mortal and myth. But if you think tangling with living gods sounds intense, wait until you meet the prisoner who accidentally became Juan, the hero of Kvatch. This is the one that still breaks people's brains, because the hero of Kvatch doesn't just go from prisoner to savior. They go from prisoner to literal god. And the path between those 2 points is one of the wildest character arcs in gaming history. It starts, as it always does, in a cell. The hero is rotting in the Imperial City dungeons for reasons we never learn, which is basically an Elder Scrolls tradition at this point. But their life changes when Emperor Uriel Septim VII, fleeing assassins from the mythic Dawn cult, uses the prisoner's cell as an escape route. The Emperor recognizes something in this random convict and entrusts them with the Amulet of Kings. Minutes later, Uriel is dead, stabbed by mythic Dawn agents. Suddenly, this prisoner is holding the most important artifact in Tamriel with zero backup. The dragonfires go out, barriers between Nirn and Oblivion weaken, and Mehrunes Dagon's forces start pouring through Oblivion gates across Cyrodiil. Kvatch is nearly wiped off the map. The hero earns their name by closing that first gate at Kvatch, walking into a hellscape dimension and shutting it down while an entire city collapses around them. From there, they locate Martin Septim, the Emperor's illegitimate son, and spend the crisis protecting him and closing gate after gate. The final confrontation sees Mehrunes Dagon himself physically stepping into the Imperial City. Martin shatters the amulet, transforms into an avatar of Akatosh, defeats Dagon, and petrifies into the dragon statue in the Temple of the One. The hero is named Champion of Cyrodiil, gates sealed permanently. End of story. Except it's not even close, because then the Shivering Isles expansion happens. The hero enters the realm of Sheogorath, the Daedric Prince of Madness, and learns about the Grey March, a recurring cycle where Jiggalag, the Prince of Order, destroys everything Sheogorath has built. Over the course of the expansion, the hero takes on Sheogorath's responsibilities, defeats Jiggalag, and breaks the cycle permanently. And then Jiggalag looks at the hero and essentially says, "You are now Sheogorath, not you're filling in, not you're the steward. You are the Daedric Prince of Madness." Bethesda confirmed this directly. The Sheogorath you meet in Skyrim's Mind of Madness quest is the former hero of Kvatch. A nameless prisoner who couldn't even leave a dungeon cell becomes, in sequence, an escaped convict, a courier, a gate closer, the champion of Cyrodiil, and then a Daedric Prince, an immortal, reality-warping entity that exists outside side of time. That's not a character arc. That's a vertical line going straight up. Now, some fans debate the metaphysics. Does mantling mean you literally become that entity, losing your original identity? Or do you retain your sense of self while wearing the mantle like a divine costume? The lore is deliberately vague, but functionally, it doesn't matter. Whether the hero is Sheogorath or merely became Sheogorath, a mortal prisoner achieved apotheosis. No other Elder Scrolls protagonist comes close. The Nerevarine fulfilled a prophecy. The last Dragonborn defeated a world-eating dragon. But the hero of Kvatch became a god, which is, a slightly bigger deal. If you think ascending to divinity is the ceiling for Elder Scrolls protagonists, wait until you hear about the one who was born with a dragon's soul and didn't even know it. The last Dragonborn. Every other protagonist on this list had to earn their legend. The last Dragonborn was born with theirs already written in prophecy, carved into an Elder Scroll, and waiting for the world to catch up. That makes them the most terrifying hero in the entire franchise. The year is 4E201. The Empire is fractured. Skyrim is tearing itself apart in civil war. And into this mess rides a nameless prisoner in the back of a wagon, hands bound, heading straight for the chopping block at Helgen. No trial, no fanfare. Just a sharp axe and a short walk. Then, a dragon shows up. Alduin, the World Eater, firstborn of Akatosh, the literal embodiment of the end of all things, crashes into Helgen and reduces the entire town to ash. The execution falls apart. Our prisoner slips away in the chaos, which is, not ideal for the Imperials, but pretty convenient for the fate of the entire world. Here's where it gets interesting. Shortly after escaping, the Dragonborn helps kill a dragon at the Western Watchtower near Whiterun. Normal enough, but then the dragon's soul rips out of its corpse and flows directly into the Dragonborn's body. No ritual, no spell, no preparation, just raw, instinctive absorption of a semi-divine being's essence. That's not something you learn. That's something you are. The last Dragonborn is immortal, born with the soul of a dragon. Literally, their draconic nature grants them the ability to absorb dragon souls on contact and learn the Thu'um by instinct rather than through decades of meditation. The Greybeards spend their entire lives mastering a handful of shouts. The Dragonborn picks them up like collecting bottle caps. It takes these ancient monks about 40 seconds after the Watchtower incident to shake the foundations of their monastery, calling this person to them. When 4 monks simultaneously shout your name so hard it triggers earthquakes across the province, you know you're dealing with something significant. But what makes the last Dragonborn truly unique isn't just raw power, it's timing. Alduin's return was foretold in the Elder Scrolls themselves. The attack on Helgen wasn't random. It was the opening move in a cosmic chess game set up since the Merethic era. And the Dragonborn's role? Kill a god, not banish, not seal away. The ancient Nord heroes who first fought Alduin used an Elder Scroll to punt him forward through time rather than actually ending him. They kicked the problem down the road by several thousand years. The last Dragonborn doesn't get that luxury. They pursue Alduin all the way to Sovngarde, the Nordic afterlife, where the World Eater has been devouring the souls of the dead to fuel his power. And there, the Dragonborn does what no one in history has managed. They put Alduin down, a mortal walking into the afterlife to kill the thing that's supposed to end the world. That's not heroism. That's a mythic event on the scale of creation itself. Here's what separates the last Dragonborn from everyone else we've covered. The Eternal Champion restored an emperor. The Nerevarine dismantled false gods. The hero of Kvatch sealed barriers between worlds, all massive. But the last Dragonborn confronted the literal end of everything. Alduin's function is to devour the entire world at the end of each Kalpa, each cycle of time, so creation can begin again. By defeating him, the Dragonborn isn't just saving people, they're potentially extending the existence of reality itself. Whether Alduin is permanently dead remains one of the biggest unanswered questions in Elder Scrolls lore. Paarthurnax suggests that Alduin's role as World Eater is fundamental to the structure of time, and that his end may not be as final as it appears. The universe might need its devourer, eventually, but that's a problem for another era. In 4E201, the last Dragonborn stands as the culmination of everything this series has been building toward. Prisoner who becomes a prophet, a mortal who carries divinity without belonging to any dynasty or throne. Every protagonist in this franchise started with nothing. A cell, a wagon, a sacrificial altar, and every single one reshaped the world. But the last Dragonborn? They might have reshaped eternity. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more, click the video on the screen now.